Hey guys, Tyler Ansman here with Tyler Ansman Performance. So today we're going to discuss how we view changing pitching performance for the better and what kind of three categories we look at when we're deciding what's holding an athlete back. Okay, so the first of our three basic categories is physiological. All right, so basically an athlete, when they don't throw hard enough, this is one of the first places we're going to look and we can most simply influence, generally speaking. All right, so this would be, we're looking at, are they force or velocity deficient? So if we're looking at this in a throwing context, this may be, how do they do with static type throwing drills versus drills with added momentum? In the context of, the weight room and the strength conditioning side of things, how do they do with a static jump, a counter movement jump, and a depth jump, for example? Right? Where do they kind of fit on that force velocity curve? We may profile them with med balls, all of that kind of stuff. So we decide on where they're deficient, if they are somewhere, and then we can kind of attack those weaknesses as we see fit. All right? So the next kind of piece of this would be over and under load throwing. That's a tool we have in our toolbox as well. So this would be in the context of max intent. All right, so we're doing over and under load throwing at full effort. We can really make some physiological changes in terms of, again, the force or velocity side of things, the arm speed, or kind of the force output side of things when it comes to throwing. All right, the next piece would be our plyometric and ballistic training. So this is more in the context of the strength conditioning side of things. All right, what are we using to kind of influence the physiological needs of this athlete? The lifting side of things, and then mobility. So physiological is one of the first places we'll look because we can kind of most simply influence that before we move on to anything else. All right, and we'll see how that kind of changes the velocity limitations in terms of throwing that an athlete may have. The second piece of this is the technical side of things. All right, so how are they throwing in terms of technique? All right, so what kind of limitations do we see when we do their kind of pitching mechanical analysis? All right, and then we can attack those with specific drills to change these patterns. All right, if it's something else on the technical side that's limiting them, maybe it's not in terms of their mechanics, it may be pitch design. Do they have adequate off speed? Are they utilizing their fastball well? All right, what does our spin rate and spin efficiency look like when we're talking about the pitch profile that we have? All right, and then we may have command training. Is command a limiting factor for these guys, right? We may have a guy who throws plenty hard enough, but everything else in his repertoire is poor, whether it's command, maybe even has great stuff and command just bad. So we kind of need to look at that as well. The last piece is then competition modeling. Does he just have a problem when he gets into the game not actually being able to put it all together? All right, so what does it look like with setting hitters up, getting hitters out, dealing with the pressure of maybe being heckled, the loud kind of stadiums, all that kind of stuff. So what does it look like when a hitter actually steps in the box? And we can work on that as well. So that's kind of the technical side of things that we may look at when we're trying to influence pitch performance. The final piece to this is load. All right, so we can think about this both in acute and chronic senses, all right, or the acute to chronic workload ratio that we kind of talked about in past videos. But basically, how much can this athlete do safely, both in a training and competition context? Is this something that's limiting them? Do we need to kind of work on their work capacity? Or more specifically, do we need to work on kind of what they can do in a game, right? Because starters are going to be asked generally from the high school level on to be able to throw 85 to 120 pitches, all right? And that's probably about once a week or so until they get to the professional level. Then it's probably going to be once every 5 days. So we need to be thinking on that kind of time cycle, and we also need to be thinking on this kind of pitch volume type deal. With relievers then, we have a little bit different. So this is going to be different. Obviously, long relievers are kind of a less common thing on most teams. So most relievers are going to be asked to throw about 15 to 30 pitches when they go out there, right? So generally 1 or 2 innings. And they're going to be asked to do that 2 to 3 times a week depending on their role on the team. So we need to make sure that we're setting them up to be able to handle that. So that's kind of how load fits into this. And that's kind of the last piece to the puzzle that we'll look at when we decide on kind of what's limiting a pitcher's performance. Generally, all three of these things are working together. It's hardly ever just one. But as the athlete gets to a higher and higher level, it does tend to be, we're kind of splitting hairs here, deciding where we can kind of get that extra performance out of them. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below, give me a like, subscribe so you don't miss any more content, and feel free to reach out with any questions you might have.